This week, in a guarded compound on the foot of the Rockies, government scientists are working on a new kind of global alarm system. One that can detect if another country tries to dim the sun. I am not kidding. They can also detect if the moon is brightened by groups of grade schoolers reflecting sunlight off their phone screens.
The former head of supermarket chain Tesco wants to build an undersea power cable from the UK to Morocco. That's 2,500 miles of cable. It could be shorter than that, but they can't stop themselves from making it longer than it needs to be, like how they always put the milk in the farthest possible location of the supermarket.
Oh, why did they do that? Sunday Night Football, the most watched primetime TV show in the United States of America, is now backed up by batteries instead of fossil fuels. Now, if batteries can only reduce the large number of brain injuries I have to watch in a 3-hour period, we'd be getting somewhere.
You know, you're missing something. The brain injuries is why people tune in.
Oh.
Finland is working on the world's first permanent geological repository for spent nuclear fuel. This will supersede the current strategy for nuclear waste, which is mainly just sweeping it under a rug and hoping no one notices.
All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. And also this week, Brian, Russia is having a hard time blowing up Ukraine's renewable energy sources. And when they do, renewables are a lot faster to get back online than fossil fuel. You may not be surprised to hear that. And the buzz in Britain is that the UK will actually stick to their 2030 ban of combustion vehicles this time around. They backed off before, but this time looks better, looks good.
Yeah, that's all encouraging. Like, I'm going to talk about a couple of stories this week that, so Ukraine, it's easier to get clean energy up and running. We have many, many complicated ways to make energy on this planet. And, those two stories that I'm going to talk about, nuclear waste and gigantic undersea power cables, are part of that, complicated side of energy, which I always kind of wonder about. Is that extra effort worth it? So I have a bit of a cold this week. I hope I sound okay.
Where did you get it? Was it traveling?
Yeah, it was probably on we had that flight to Toronto not too long ago. So
did you wear a mask on the plane?
I didn't. No.
Oh.
But
everybody I know is getting sick on planes these days. Anyone who takes a plane is getting sick. They're petri dishes with wings, Brian. Yeah, I don't know. What you can do.
As you know, I've flown several times in the last, 6-7 months or so. And as far as I know, this is the first time that I ended up with a cold. So that's not too bad. So I want to give a quick update on my heat pump. We haven't talked about this in a while. I have an air source heat pump to heat my home, which isn't necessarily newsworthy. Heat pumps are essentially a proven technology at this point. It's an air.
But if you're new to the show, you must know that Brian lives in a bloody cold place.
Exactly.
Where we are podcasting from. What did it get down to? Well, we had wind chills in the minus 30. Like it felt like minus 30 Celsius and God knows what Fahrenheit. Yeah. So it can get bloody cold here. And you are a scientific leader, an experimenter of testing to see how this will work. You've put your own money into it, and you're testing out how a heat pump works in our unpleasantly cold climate. And heat pumps generally only get down into the minus 20s before you need a backup, right? Yeah. I mean, generally speaking, although there's some advancements going on that are extending that a little bit. But so what's happening? You've had some problems just with the technology, just because firmware updates and everything, and
slight problems. But first, let me address that thing of, so my unit is supposed to work down to about minus 22 Celsius. And then there's a backup resistive heater, which is essentially a 10,000 watt heater. Simple mechanism.
Not efficient.
Yeah, not efficient, but it's an electric furnace basically, and it kicks in.
A heat pump moves heat from outdoors in, even in cold weather, and that is efficient, sometimes 3, sometimes even 4, they say, times efficient.
But the issue with
as normal
heat pumps, as you say, they tend to work down. There's some now that work down to minus 30, but I think as they get to that minus 30, they're essentially working, they lose their efficiency. So when it's down at minus 30, it's the same efficiency as a sort of an old-fashioned electric heater. So, once you hit the minus 20s, those advantages start to go away. And of course, an air source heat pump is basically just a air conditioner that can run in reverse. If you take a window unit air conditioner, the old fashioned kind, and you just install it backwards, the back element will literally heat your house. It'll heat your room. So, you know, you can use the same idea to heat your house with a heat pump. So this is the second winter that I've had it. And it's basically worked, but we had some ice buildup this time. And this is odd to me because it didn't happen last winter. But there's an outdoor unit that looks like an outdoor air conditioning unit, and it's got a big fan, and the whole thing, the fan is vertical. And there was just a time where
some of them have de-icers on them, right? Like some of them will have a heating element to go on every so often.
Yeah. What it has is a defrost cycle. So what it can do is reverse the fluids. So it can put the warm fluids to the outside unit to try and defrost it. But I'm not sure how well that works. It would be maybe a good idea if it had some kind of a little, I talked with my installer and he said, well, maybe if it continues to be a problem, we could put some heat tape on there. People use heat tape sometimes. If you've got pipes that freeze, you can wrap this, tape around it with an electrical connection and just sort of heat up. So yeah, it was just weird because there were 3 days in a row where it really kind of iced up and the fan stopped spinning because there was just a little bit too much ice in there. So you get an error message on the thermostat and then you go outside and you realize that, there's a bit of ice buildup. So it's not that big a deal to get rid of. You basically open the door on the unit and then just with a wrench or something, you just bang off the ice and, it takes a few minutes, but you get rid of all the ice, you close it up, and then it's fine. It's just weird that it did it 3 days in a row because it didn't do it at all last winter.
Weather.
Yeah.
So weird. It's the El Nino.
Is that what it is?
It's the El Nino. Yeah. Yeah, we're getting a lot of snow this year. I think we have had more snow already.
Yeah.
Than we had
a lot of
last year, maybe the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy.
But I thought it might have something to do with the humidity or the dew point or something like that.
Yeah. Because we've had fog, so that's kind of a thing. Like when you have fog, then you're getting probably deposits on you, and you have to scrape it off your window. Maybe it builds up on the heat pump elements as well.
And that's not typically
because it's blowing air through, and the more air it blows, the more moisture it blows if it's moist out.
Yeah, and the fan, it's got little teeth on the edges of it, so it's supposed to be able to like cut a little bit of ice. It sort of looks like it's prepared for that. Wow. But yeah, it did it 3 days in a row, and then it didn't do it since, even though the temperatures were kind of similar. So yeah, just something to do with the humidity or the dew point or something like that.
Well, heat pumps do work in most places. We're just not most places, which is why we are, scientists when it comes to using our EVs in winter. I've heard a lot of people in the Tesla group say that they're getting 50% range when it got bitterly, bitterly cold. Down to minus 30 in the city north of us. So yeah, but the cars are working. I mean, I drove by a couple of people getting boosts in my Nissan Leaf. My 2013 Nissan Leaf is still running. And I'm passing people getting boosts in their combustion vehicles and trying to get them started in cold weather.
Yeah.
So
it turns out EVs work fantastic in the cold, but of course you do have to put up with that range loss. And where we live is ridiculously cold, sometimes minus 40. So that kind of 50% range loss is not normal. As long as you're driving around the city, it's fine because you have a full battery in the morning. It's just if you're on a road trip or something. And we've done our own scientific studies of that, of surviving.
And we will continue to do so.
But so there was about a 2 or 3 day period there where it got super cold. So it was just relying on the backup resistive heater. And we actually had a problem with that too. The breaker started flipping on the backup resistive heater. And that scares me. Well, it scared me because
you're lucky to be alive.
The temperatures were starting to go down.
This podcast may not have happened. We might have had to break out AI, Brian.
Right.
And believe me, I have him ready to go.
But I had, again, my heat pump installer guy came over. It turns out it was just a loose wire somewhere in the machine. Something wasn't just tightened up. He tightened it up, and that's been fine. So as long as the breaker wasn't flipping.
You're dealing with that much heat with a resistive heater. You want those wires tight.
You want them tight.
I'm sorry, electricians everywhere, but I had that problem too.
Oh, yeah.
Loose breakers on my panel, and it heated up the whole panel. I mean, the guy who came and fixed it said, we're not going to charge you because we're just happy you're alive. So yeah, that was scary. It's scary when electricians don't do their job.
Yeah.
Tell that to your son, who's an electrician.
But
don't screw people.
It had me thinking.
It's bad to kill people.
It had me thinking about backup strategies because it turns out we do have a couple of electric space heaters, and those are fantastic because they're super cheap. Like for $25, you can get a 1,500 watt, space heater, And we happen to have two of them in the house. I have one here in the bomb shelter because there's no heating in the bomb shelter. So in the winters here, I warm up the room a little bit before we record with the space heater and then turn it off to keep the noise down. But it occurred to me that our backup heater is 10,000 watts. So with a handful of space heaters, if your house isn't too big and you can spread them around like 1,500 watts onto different circuits.
This is what my brother did when he took over my mother's house after she passed away. His furnace stopped working. Maybe he didn't change the filter. I don't know. It seems it's something that my brother would do. And he went out and bought all these space heaters. Well, I now have one of them because he had a whole bunch. But then he had to have an electrician come because he overloaded the system. The system, like this is a 1968 house and the panel is decent, but it needed work. I think it may have needed replacing after that. So that was I can't remember all of that, but it was a scary time. Holy crap.
Yeah. But, in your house, James, you have a very well insulated house. It's like a passive solar house. It's on 2 levels. So again, as long as you didn't blow a breaker with a handful of space heaters, and you should almost have them as a backup because they're only $25. And what always happens here is it's like Christmas Eve, and that's when your furnace goes out. And then you have to pay the huge bucks to get the emergency service on Christmas Eve. That, it always...
It's usually a cold weather that's been making it run harder. And
like the last time our gas furnace went out, it was on Easter weekend. It was on a Good Friday.
Oh, boy.
And it wasn't super cold out. Like April's fairly warm here. But again, it's like, well, you got to pay those emergency rates to have somebody come out and fix it. So
actually, there's a company that came that I had the power utility do a tune-up on my furnace because they'll do it if you earn under a certain amount. I didn't even have to prove how much I earned. They just took my word for it and came out and they looked at me and came out. They listen to the podcast. They know. So they came out and the guy said, by the way, if you ever need anything, we don't charge overtime. So I can give you the people who don't charge overtime for, I don't know how they do that, but they don't. So, yeah. And they are the people actually, no, they're one of the 2 companies that does my brand of furnace Carrier. So it's been working well. Yeah. We've had a lot of cloudy weather here, and the house is heated largely by the sun, but my doors have been leaky and my windows have failed. The seals in my windows have failed. I put them in when I got the house 15 and a half years ago, and they're all kind of failing now. And so it's not as warm as it used to be, and the furnace has been running constantly, and I think there's some sort of leak in my crawl space that's letting cold air in or something. Anyway, but the sun came out, no furnace, completely off. It didn't matter how cold it was. The sun heats the house. So it's a great idea.
And even us too, like our house is not designed as a passive solar house, but we do have excellent southern exposure. So I noticed there was a time when it was minus 25 out, but it was sunny. And then the whole furnace shut down because it didn't need to be on.
And I just wanted to mention that Nissan is on the ropes financially again, and it could be a year or so before they need to be bailed out or bought. They've had rough times before. They are having them again. They have not. They were an early maker of EVs, but they never really got behind them. They never made them all that compelling for a mass market and never improved on them. And there's a tweet that I wanted to mention that talked about how Norway incentivizes EVs because they're going to get rid of combustion sales basically next year. And they're around 95% are EVs, not just, plug-in cars, but EVs are like close to in the 90s percentile right now. And Toyota Corolla, it sells for $26,451 in Canada where we live. But if it was Norway, they would add 114% tax on that Toyota Corolla, and it would turn into $56,000 and change to buy a Toyota Corolla, which is why people are buying EVs. And the Ram 1500 pickup truck is $55,000 here in Canada, but it would have a 230% tax, which would apparently make it $181,000. So if you want a pickup, buy an electric one. Honda CRV, that's a small SUV hybrid. This is a hybrid. It has a 95% tax on hybrids. So Yeah, they're not fooling around.
Yeah.
And that would turn that Honda CRV into nearly $100,000. So, and then you look at the Tesla Model 3, which of course is an EV. This is the long range rear wheel drive. It is $54,990 in Canada, but it would have a 5% tax. So it would only turn into 57. So it's not no tax, but it's actually lower because I think the VAT is often 15% in Europe.
Yeah.
19% on cars in Germany, for example. So despite, winding back some tax benefits, EVs accounted for 94% of new car sales in October, almost double the rate of China. And China's pretty darn good at plug-in vehicles and new energy vehicles being around 55% over the summer and fall, putting the country within reach to stop adding combustion cars next year. And the person who tweeted this tweeted it in French because they're from Canada. They tweeted in French and English. And I saw it and I couldn't find the English one. So I went to the French one. I don't speak French, but I mean, numbers are numbers. Yeah. Dollar sounds in a weird place. And then now I'm getting French Corolla ads on YouTube all the time. French speaking Corolla ads because I went to this tweet. And I specifically went to Twitter to turn off share data with third parties. And look what happened. Like, this is a blatant example of Musk screwing me. And I'm starting to become a crusty old man, and I even downloaded DuckDuckGo, the browser for privacy. Have you gone in that direction yet?
I use the Brave browser, and I've used that for a long time, and it's similar, I assume. It blocks a bunch of ads, and it blocks trackers, and it's the way to go.
And YouTube ads are getting hideous now. They're nearly a minute, and it's like I just say goodbye. I just leave when that happens.
And of course, you can pay for the premium YouTube to get rid of the ads, but not everybody wants to do that.
Brian, I know you're not an NFL fan, and barely am I, but a lot of Canadians are. You might be surprised in the United States, even though we have the CFL. A lot of people watch the NFL here. It is broadcast on our main networks, whereas the CFL, the Canadian version, is only broadcast on cable TV, but Sunday Night Football is the biggest primetime show in the United States.
A perfect Sunday night for football.
It's time to go to work.
We're going to have to be aggressive. Dominate on three.
And 3, 2,
So I was watching with my son in another city the football game on Sunday night, which was in Buffalo, New York, and they had lake effect snow of 60 centimeters,
Yikes.
Which is like 1.5 feet or something. It's a lot of snow, and they paid 20,000 people to come out. Buffalo's crazy. The Buffalo fans are we talk about how hardy we are in our city for going to a game in November or late October, but these guys went out overnight and shoveled out the stadium, got paid $20 an hour and had some food, and I'm guessing a beer or two that they were given. And but I was watching it, and the broadcast saluted their people, and they had an aerial shot of their trucks. They have 10 trucks, and they were talking about how the truckers, went through snowstorms and had to go around and drove all these thousands of miles to get there. And one of the trucks, because I'm a TV nerd, and I'm sure you are too, I have an interest in how things work on TV, because I always have when I was a kid. That's why I got into film and television when I was an adult. And I noticed on the truck, there was a lot of them. And I know, for a CFL game, there might be one truck for the switching to TV, and then one truck for the satellite dish, a smaller truck for the satellite uplink. They have 10 now, just for a Sunday night game. But it is American television, and it is the biggest show on prime time. People watch it. It's not, people think just a couple guys show up with a microphone and a couple cameras. It is a big, big production. There's wardrobe. There's all kinds of camera dollies and units and cranes and different technology that takes up a lot of room, a lot of people. So they showed the trucks, and one of the trucks had some writing on it. And so, of course, I froze it to the annoyance of my family and had it look at it. And it said a Greco on the side. And I thought, that kind of looks like a generator truck, that you would see on a film set, except bigger because it was a full-on semi. And then I thought, there's something about that. I wonder if it has batteries in it. And sure enough, it did. Because I Googled it, and the Greco people who often make generators, like gas power generators, are now making batteries. So they have a battery backup now for Sunday night football. And there's a reason for that, is because the way NFL works, it mostly happens on Sundays, one game on Monday night and one game on Thursday night, usually. And most of the games, if there was a power outage during, say, Sunday afternoon, you could just cut to another game. You wouldn't necessarily lose your audience when that happened. But Sunday night, it's just that. There's nowhere to go. So they have to have a backup. And what they used to use is a very, very, very large generator that burned a lot of fuel. And so they've got a whole page on this talking about how they've gone green. And during the 10 trucks that travel with them, this Agreco truck, this whole semi-trailer that's parked next to the satellite uplink truck, offers 10 minutes of battery power from 6 power supply units. So basically the power cables are running up to the booth in the stadium, and all their technology and cameras and everything can be powered for 10 minutes. That doesn't sound like much, but they use a lot of power. They use 0.5 megawatt of power, which is like a small city practically. And it has its own heating and AC, so it can't go down due to weather. So even if the power is out, it will moderate the temperature on a heat wave or a cold snap or whatever, and keep it going. And they used to burn 1,200 gallons of fossil fuel to power these games, just to have that generator running, just in case the power grid or the stadium power went down.
Have it on standby.
They would not have an interruption. Yeah. So that was 1,200 gallons. Now they have 10 minutes and they can turn on the generator at some point during that 10 minutes if they need to, but it's there. So yeah, batteries.
Okay, so 10 minutes of power, and if they need more than that, they can kick in the generator.
Yes, and they would probably fire up the generator just to have it going, and just even while they rely on batteries, but they don't need to keep the generator going for the whole game as a backup. So if any individual circuit breaker fails from the stadium, the universal power supply continues to provide power to the television truck. Is designed so that even if all the power from the stadium fails in the television compound, and there is a compound, it's like a film circus of all the trucks there, we can still provide enough power to keep it on air. And Brian, they also are involved in the Super Bowl, which of course is an even bigger production. They have 25 trucks to power there, as well as studio sets, various sets around the stadium need power and lights, and they use 3.5 megawatts of power on the Super Bowl. Like that's a third of a solar farm that we have here, like it's thousands of homes would be powered by that. And they have battery backup for short duration, and 10 megawatts of fossil fuel generators for the Super Bowl if needed. And you don't want to go down during the Super Bowl because, you just don't. And there could be, nefarious things too, but things have happened before. I think I've seen it, in my lifetime.
No, that's crazy. Here's my contrast to that. Back when I was in high school, our high school was on the cutting edge of video technology, and we videotaped our high school football games for the coach, and I was part of the AV nerd club. So we had these half-inch reel-to-reel black and white video recorders, and that's what we recorded football on.
Wow. Really? Really?
Yeah. And we were ahead of everyone else. No one else in our city high school football league had video replay. But
was this for scouting?
No, just so the coach could analyze the game and show it to the players.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
I think I did that for our team once. They phoned the station where I was working and said, "Hey, can you come down and film our practice?"
And the old football stadium, of course, didn't have any elevators, so you'd have to go up about 10 ramps with a cart and move all your stuff up by hand. So that's the contrast to the NFL. And
you didn't want a nosebleed in that stadium. Well, stadiums are like that regardless. If the worse shape you are, get a lower seat. That's all I have to say.
All right. So from The Guardian, former Tesco boss wants to send power from Morocco to Great Britain using a subsea cable. So we've talked about these kinds of stories before. And just a few weeks ago, they were talking about doing, it's been approved that there's shorter cables to, France, from the UK. But this one is going to be quite long if it happens. It's going to be 4,000 kilometers long all the way to Morocco. And the idea being that Morocco has lots of sunshine, they have lots of wind, and they should be able to provide power to the UK. So this project is from the company X-Links, and Dave Lewis is the chairman, and he was formerly the chairman of Tesco. This is the big supermarket chain that they have there in the UK. And apparently he's the one that sort of brought them back from the brink. He was the CEO that came in and turned them around. They were having financial problems. So for whatever reason, this is the next thing that he wants to do. He thinks this is a great idea, and it doesn't need any government subsidies. He's not looking for any funding for this. He just needs cooperation from the governments that you would always have to lay a big undersea cable. He just wants purchase agreements. That's the only sticking point, is that 70 to 80 pounds per megawatt hour is what he wants to set as the contract price. And as long as he can get that, he thinks that he can raise the money to do this. That figure is similar to what offshore wind farms are expected to be costing in the next few years. So 70 to 80 pounds per megawatt hour. So his thinking here, there's a nice quote from them. If oil and gas companies can build pipelines across the world to pump toxic, leaky substances, then we really should be able to run power lines, and it should be easier. But it does fall into that category of maybe this is needlessly complicated. It's great if they can do it, great if it works. But 4,000 kilometers, 2,500 miles is awfully long. And, there's always a limit to these kind of crazy projects, whether or not it actually makes sense. And the logic behind it being is that the UK is a fairly small island. So you can't necessarily expect to get all of your resources and all of your power from that small island. So the more cooperation.
Lots of wind, though. Lots of wind potential there. Low shelf, or high shelf, rather, around the island. So there's really good wind potential. But they've talked about this for a long time. We've mentioned it before in the show. It's been since 2020, I think, that they've been talking about this. And the thing that once you go that far south, you're getting pretty close to the equator on the northern tip of Africa by Algeria there. And, the days will be longer, the less seasonality. So that's interesting. There's that advantage to it. But also, France and Spain are there. I know they have some places where you could probably export some renewables. And they're talking wind and solar, is that right? Both wind and solar to be transferred on this line?
And possibly batteries as well, too.
Right. Well, what's the point of that?
Well, I guess
you could put the batteries on the other end, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to just keep it in, what sense does that make? I'm not sure about that. I mean, maybe it's more profitable for them.
Yeah. So this is not a thing that's going to happen anytime soon. As you say, they've already been talking about it for years, and it would take several more years to even get approved. And then they're hoping to have it maybe running by 2030 or something like that, or into the early 2030s. And, we all know we're going to need a lot more power in the future. This is one way. And, does it make financial sense? I'm not sure, but I guess we'll find out.
Well, there's even been proposals, not legitimate, serious ones, about going from North America to Europe.
Yeah.
And, it's sunny on one side. And, if it was easy and easily cost effective, sure, but it's not. There was a big New York Times piece on underwater cables for internet.
Yeah.
And it's ships' anchors can, rip them up. They have to go repair them. Like Africa was getting their internet cut, and cell phones, nothing worked. And people were not happy. So we wouldn't stand for that around here. But our first world problems.
But it's a great point that we have figured out how to make oil pipelines on virtually every inch of the earth.
Oh, we'll find a way to do it. We go through mountains. We'll do whatever it takes to get that oil burned. Yay for that. The U.S. is building an early warning system to detect geoengineering. I thought this was a weird James Bond this can't be real story, but here we are. It's real. In a guarded compound at the foot of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, government scientists are working on a new kind of global alarm system, one that can detect if another country or maybe just an adventurous billionaire, which is quite possible. Some guy could just...
Mr. Burns was planning
Elon
to do
Musk
this, wasn't he?
The world. Sure. Yeah, he was going to block out the sun. I don't know if he was a billionaire. But, somebody like Elon Musk could take matters in their own hands and start, throwing up jets and dispersing material and aerosols, especially from another part of the world, to dim the sun. And they could do it without approval. A country could do it without, agreement from other countries. So they're trying to detect this to know as far in advance as possible, maybe so they can go blow up who's ever doing it if it starts to dim a little bit. Many worry that the solar geoengineering could have unintended consequences, shattering regional weather patterns and damaging everything from agriculture to local economies. And the first steps could be done quite quietly by a rogue actor or another nation operating without any regulations or controls. So the United States is building a system that would allow it to determine if and when others may be trying to tamper with the Earth's thermostat. Quote, if a country, a major ally, or a major opponent is building up capabilities, can our scientists tell us what they're trying to do and the impact of what that would be? Asked Kelly Wasner, founder and executive director of Silver Lining, a nonprofit group that advocates for geoengineering research and helped persuade Congress to fund NOAA's program. So how dangerous is that? How fast and how far would we have to respond? Different organizations in the government are participating in this. The Weather Service, NOAA, the NASA, and the military, they're all doing different things. Whatever, their air balloons and things of NOAA, and NASA's doing other research. So yeah, this is all together, and these weather nerds are all there in the mountains working on this, making sure that this does not happen. Yeah, so it's an interesting story.
Yeah, well, every once in a while, somebody comes up with a scheme to, well, maybe if we just created more cloud cover, then the Earth would cool and it would mitigate some of the effects of climate change, global warming, and yeah, maybe that would work. I don't know, but it's maybe a good idea to know if somebody is doing that.
Yes, I think it's probably a good idea, and I can believe that it would be done. I mean, somebody like Musk could go off on his own island somewhere and start doing things on his own. Like it doesn't seem that weird. So yeah, there's a story on Yahoo about that, Yahoo News, and yeah, it's popped up in different places. But yeah, there it is. James Bondy science fiction stuff.
All right,
that we have on our show here. It's weird.
Okay, moving on. This is a story from Power Magazine. Every once in a while, we talk about Finland, and we have, I think, one listener in Finland.
Oh, sure. I'm sure we have a dozen.
This is content.
Hello, Finland. We're not going to play your national anthem or anything, but hello.
Anyway, they're working on the world's first permanent geological repository, which raises the question, I guess, that all nuclear disposal to this point has been non-permanent.
I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it's like we'll put it here for a few millennia and see what happens, and our great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren can dig it up.
Anyway, so the trial run, which is a crucial part of the disposal facility's commissioning, is expected to conclude within the next year. This is another very long-term project. They've been working on this for years. So just the test run is going to go into next year, and then they're hoping to continue it. So yeah, it says 4 decades of site investigations. They've been working on this for a long, long time.
That's a long time.
And they finally granted a decision for where the repository would be back in 2000. So they decided back in 2000. But again, this just goes to show you how complicated this stuff is. I'm no genius, but if I was starting an energy company.
Oh, come on.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, I am a genius. But if I was starting an energy company right now, I mean, just like the headaches of this are absolutely insane. Like when you could put up solar, wind, and batteries, practically with your neighbor doing it. So, yeah, I just wanted to talk about some of the insane lengths that they're going to here. And presumably once it's done, this is going to be the best way to dispose of nuclear waste. So it's built at a depth of 400 to 430 meters. There's a spiral-shaped access tunnel, 4 vertical shafts, a personnel shaft, a canister shaft, and 2 ventilation shafts. There's tunnels and technical rooms. A key feature is
What's a technical room?
I don't know. I mean,
I want to know what a technical room is, and how do I get one?
That's where that's the lunchroom, I guess, where they keep the television set. There's an encapsulation plant where the spent fuel is safely sealed in disposal canisters. And they started on this part back in 2019. They're going to, there's a spherical graphite cast iron canisters, and this is designed to contain Finland's boiling water reactor and pressurized water reactor spent fuel, totaling 6,500 tons of uranium. Inside the underground rooms, fuel will be loaded into about 3,250 canisters with heavily shielded fuel handling cell with 1.3 meter thick concrete walls. Each canister is then filled with argon gas, sealed with a steel lid, and topped with a copper lid secured by friction stir welding utilizing the KBS-3 method. Oh, that's a good one, the KBS-3. That's the best method. That's
much better than the chew.
Yeah,
I didn't
better.
care for the chew.
And they developed this in partnership with the Swedish Radioactive Waste Management. So Sweden is working on something similar, other countries as well. So once they're sealed, the canisters will be lowered by a specialized lift down 430 meters into the crystalline bedrock, and they'll be then transported to an 8-meter deep deposition tunnels that are surrounded by bentonite clay, and that is their permanent storage location.
Well, I got to get into nuclear fuel storage because it seems like a pretty good business. Just dig a really deep hole.
Yeah.
And hope for the best. I don't know.
I mean, that's essentially what it is. You seal it up well, you put it in bedrock and clay, and you put it down far. It says here that there's more than 400 nuclear reactors in the world in 31 countries, and they're producing about 430,000 tons of spent fuel every year. So presumably that
sounds like a lot.
That sounds like a lot.
It's not poop that you can process at a sewage processing plant. You have to just you have to transport it safely. Yeah, a lot of times that aspect of it, that financial aspect of it, is not included in the price of electricity.
That's right.
That when you're quoted nuclear,
you have to include the price of storage for literally hundreds or perhaps thousands of years.
And decommissioning the plant as well.
Sweden's working on one as well. Canada as well. Apparently there's one in Ontario that they're looking at as a similar kind of deep repository. This is underway in different places.
Well, coal plant, you could probably just blow up or implode the thing. And, that would probably work. But this is a little bit different. It's time to dip into the mailbag. Brian, Blue Sky. Where it's at, Blue Sky. It's a social media platform just like Twitter, except less douchey. It's nicer. It's a nicer place. The sun always shines in Blue Sky compared to Twitter, and I am transitioning there. We are there. And this is from one of our listeners on Blue Sky. This is from Ryan Knuth writes, my EV group, evco.bluesky social, is participating in a parade this weekend. And we'll be pulling our trailer with an F-150 Lightning. That is the all-electric pickup truck from Ford. The version of their most popular and the most popular vehicle that is sold in North America is the F-150. And the all-electric battery version of that is what will be pulling his parade in Ottawa. So, we were talking about that on the show. And he says, hey, we're doing that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. We'd love to hear from you.
That's great. Yeah. Parades often towed by awful diesel.
It's the way to go.
Yeah.
It's the way to go. I think once people start realizing that children lined up on the side of the road not breathing diesel is a good thing. Yeah. And more of that.
Yes. And people are starting to realize that with school buses, for instance, which we talk about a lot. Okay. Some more mail here. This one is from Chuck. In the latest episode, you talk about people who fried inside their Tesla because they did not know how to click the non-electric door opener button. I suggest for the next show, you should provide a description of where that non-electric door opener button is. Well, it's not really a button. It's kind of a lever. I don't know. Maybe it's different in other cars, but it's part of the door handle and you pull it up towards you.
Okay. And how does the door handle normally work?
You press a button, like the solenoid button.
So this is a lever that's by that?
Yeah, it's in the same general area. So
And it's maybe more intuitive to use it that way anyway, right? Like you said, one of
my
your
friends
passengers keeps doing
was
that.
always using that anyway, because it seems perhaps more like a traditional. Yeah, a lot of cars don't open with a button, and the Tesla opens with a button.
What about the back seat? Because I remember seeing little loops down in the storage well beside the seat. Like, is there a little loop that you pull on in the back seats? How does that work?
I never ride in the back seat, so I'm not sure.
Okay, but certainly you have passengers that do, Brian.
Yeah.
Where's your safety?
I assume it's a similar thing, but we'll have to check.
Okay, we'll get back to
But
you.
I'll read the rest of the
'Cause,
letter here. We have a Tesla, but my wife does the driving as I have bad vision. I can certainly ask her where the button is for the non-electric door opener, but maybe there are other people like me who could well stand to hear the description of where the door opener button is that is not controlled by the electrical system. So yeah, it's not a button. It's more like a lever, and it's part of the door handle. And especially if you're
in the front
listening to this on audio, I'm not sure how good of a of a safety demonstration this is, but just start pulling stuff around the door handle area.
Oh, here's if you own a Tesla, read the manual and find out. I mean, Chuck can't, but his wife can sort it out for her, and he suggests that we get it going for other people too. When I saw the news story that eventually brought up this whole thing, they were showing a picture of this little loop with a orange sort of loop thing of like a little wire that you pull on, like a pretty primitive thing. I wonder if that was in the backseat, because you used to have a Model 3, one of the earliest Model 3s that were available. Has anything changed between that and your new Model S?
Oh, yeah.
And why?
There's definitely changes, but I wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head what they are.
But as far as the emergency handle goes, like, do you get an orientation when you buy a Tesla? Like, is there like a little video that plays? I thought there was.
It's not mandatory or anything, but yeah, if you go to the sort of manual section of the display, there's videos about how everything works. This is how charging works, and you watch that video. This is how putting the car into gear works, and you watch that video. Yeah.
So if you didn't listen last week, there was a crash, and sometimes, and you know what? Our friend Jay sent me an email. Yeah. This is like, he's like a grandpa now, and he's sending me old man stuff. Another, a bunch of rich teenagers crashed into a pillar and died somewhere else, and he had to send that to me. He thinks, oh, electric cars are bad. That is the premise of his emails, and I had to straighten him out. 20 times more likely that happens in a gasoline car. If you are riding at high speeds, now arguably a Tesla can go very fast. It's a sports car, and it has maybe unexpected acceleration. If you're a teenager and you're excited with your friends and you drive and lose control and slam into a very solid object, well, if you do that in any car, chances are it could ignite, right? And the battery fires are less sudden in a battery electric car, but they are more pervasive. Yeah. They are harder to put out once they do start going. But, presumably you have a little bit of time to rescue people, but they couldn't open the doors in that situation because the exterior doors don't work. If the battery, the 12-volt battery that you have in all cars these days, or most cars, doesn't work to operate the simple things like, the door handles, because it's smashed. So you need a mechanical override, and there's no exterior mechanical override. You have to break the windows, and, eventually people do, but it's kind of hard to break a window if you don't have the right tools.
Yeah, it's always good to actually have a window breaking tool with you. Like there's keychains you can have with a window breaking tool. And that can, like if you get submerged in water or something, you can whack the window, and that's always the good backup way to get out.
And that has happened here on the prairies of Canada, because there's, what do you call those little ponds, those little lagoon things on farms that they have for cows? Sloughs. So people lose control on gravel roads, like I was talking about last week, go upside down into a slough, and then you can't get out because your door doesn't open and the pressure's. So you need that pointy object. And they use it in San Francisco to break into cars. Yeah. It's just a little metal pointy thing that concentrates the pressure in one little area, and that smashes windows. Now, Tesla has made their windows even stronger, right, in the Cybertruck. So we'll have to see how that pans out. But thank you, Chuck, for writing us. We really appreciate it. Speakpipe.com/Clean Energy Show, and our email address is cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. I want to talk about Ukraine, because we've mentioned this before in the show. Russia, bad people, bad government, bad Putin. blows up things and is trying to, at this time of the year, is always blowing up their energy infrastructure to make it hard on Ukraine and make them surrender to if they freeze to death or get very uncomfortable and miserable. So they always go after the energy infrastructure in the fall. Ukraine has seen success in building clean energy, actually, even during, we talked about this before, many, many shows ago, but we talked about it before. They are building wind energy and distributed solar, and that is helping with this energy problem. A lot of their power comes from nuclear, which is not blowing up because, you know, there's threats of it, but, you know,
no one could live
it
there.
would be very bad, very, very bad if it blew up and poisoned the water system in Russia. So building clean energy, they are doing and having success, which is harder for Russia to destroy. If you think about, you know, blowing up a solar farm, it's spread out. I mean, how many solar panels can you blow up? Well, you can replace those solar panels. You can replace them very easily. There's not a whole lot to that. But this year, Russian missile attacks have knocked out about 50% of Ukraine's power generation, a major threat with winter now arriving in the region, and nearly a 3-long Russian-Ukraine war, which has left large swaths of Ukraine destroyed, has accelerated the transition to clean energy for a number of reasons. Like, you know, people not wanting to buy Russian natural gas has accelerated it in Europe. And this has also even accelerated Ukraine to get to clean energy. And, you know, Brian, I didn't know this, but they even had a pavilion at COP29, the climate conference, and it was on display a large smashed solar panel destroyed in an attack last year, which is, you know, very different for a climate conference to have on display, but they're making a political message, obviously. The decentralized nature of some clean energies, in particular wind and solar, has allowed Ukraine to quickly restore power in ways that would be impossible with Ukraine's more traditional energy sources, such as coal-fired power plants. In centralized systems, such as coal and nuclear, all power is generated and sent to the grid over transmission lines from the same area. You blow up the transmission line, you blow up a lot of people, millions even, having no power. Now, that means if the plant goes down, say an attack, a large section of the grid, or even the entire grid sometimes comes to a halt. By contrast, wind and solar installations are usually more scattered, so, you know, decentralized, less of a system that goes down with one hit. And if the solar is on rooftops, even better, the impact can be even more limited. And attacks on 2 DTEK solar farms last spring is a good example. It destroyed many solar panels, and some of the transformers would step up electricity voltage for long-distance transmission or step it down for use at homes. Replacing the transformers and swapping out destroyed panels allowed the farms, which generate 400 megawatts, to be back up in 7 days. Not bad. An attack on a thermal generating station, that's something like coal or nuclear, well, not nuclear, but let's leave nuclear out of this, or natural gas, thermal generating station, experienced similar amount of damage. It takes about 3 to 4 months to rebuild, but just a week for renewables, which is great and probably cheaper to repair. And go Ukraine.
Yeah, that's great. And we complain often that there's a couple of natural gas power plants being built where we live, and the construction's been going on to build a new plant has been going on for a couple of years now.
It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy and transportation.
China's BYD automaker has launched its second vehicle transport ship that it made itself. Talk about your vertical integration, Brian. They're even making their own ships to transport the vehicles from China overseas. 5,000 EVs are on their way to Europe on this new ship. We talked about the first one previously on the show. Now they've got 2.
Yeah, maybe if Nissan had been working on something like this, they wouldn't be in trouble like this.
Far from it, far from it. Mexico, the world's 13th largest emitter, is now committed to achieving net zero by 2050. Their new president, I'll remind you, is a retired climate scientist, something you just don't see every day. Apollo Go, that's BYD's new $30,000 US driverless SUV, just rolled out. And it is not quite like a Tesla, because it is a little bit like a hybrid between a Tesla self-driving vehicle and a Waymo self-driving vehicle, in that it has technology on the roof, as well as basic cameras surrounding the vehicle that are integrated into the panels. The point here, Brian, is that it's $30,000.
Yeah.
That's US. That's a game changer. And, yeah, I don't know. You read about that on theverge.com. The link should be there for you. Elon Musk has just lost his bid to reinstate massive Tesla pay plan, now worth $101 billion. Wouldn't it be nice if he get pissed off and left Tesla? That's my own fantasy. Time for a CES Fast Fact. 3 U.S. states provided 70 to 78% of their electricity demand with just wind for a full year. That year, October 1, 23 to September 30th, 24. Get this. South Dakota, redneck state.
Yeah.
Not far from where we live. 77.5% of the electricity for the whole year was from wind.
Wow.
The whole stinking year.
Wow.
Iowa, 76.6%. Kansas, 69.82%. And another 4 states produced 46 to 51% of their power just from wind. And when we started this podcast, people said the grid maybe could take 20% renewables. Maybe. If some grids could do that. When we started this podcast 5 years ago, no. We are seeing grids go all the way up to 100% in some cases. Not easy. Things have to be dealt with, but it's not an impossible task. It's a little bit different than what we did before, but it is happening. South Dakota produced 110% of its electricity demand with wind, water, and solar for the year, that same year. So they produced not only all of their electricity, but they exported 10% from wind, water, and solar. That's incredible. Nations failed to agree on a treaty to curb plastic pollution after 2 years of divisive negotiations as oil suppliers, including Saudi Arabia and our friends over in Russia, blocked attempts to limit production. Way to go, you petro a-holes. Almost 200 countries joined a week-long United Nations-backed summit in Busan, South Korea, which concluded in the early hours of Monday without delivering a legally binding deal to address the material's future. That is on Bloomberg News. From the New York Times, diplomats at a UN conference failed to reach the agreement. There's another New York Times story. They said they would reconvene in future months to try again. So they're going to try again, but those petrostates, they want to have their plastics. Screw them. We said last week that plastic production was as much polluting as the aerospace industry as a whole. Carbon brief analysis. China's CO2 falls 1% in the second quarter of 2024 in first quarterly drop since COVID-19. We have a link to that from the Scotsman. It's not something we talk about often on the show. The Edinburgh to London 4-hour rail journey is to be confirmed within weeks. This is around 20 minutes. It's expected to be trimmed from the journey and thus making it the same as an airline flight and more acceptable to people. This is going to entail some track improvements on the 400-mile east-west main line, despite its 125-mile-per-hour speed limit remaining unchanged. They are going to still somehow trim time off that and make it the same as flying. So that's good. Some line upgrades and other stuff and time slots, and it should all work out. BYD is launching a sodium-ion battery product for grid-scale deployment. That is, use in your power grids. Sodium replaces lithium in those batteries. That story is on Energy Storage News.
Yeah, it tends to be cheaper because sodium is cheaper than lithium.
Less energy dense doesn't matter for the grid as much as it matters in a car when you're trying to compact it all into a car and make it light. Donald Trump's pick to lead the Department of Energy, Chris Wright, is receiving enthusiastic approval from climate obstruction organizations that argue global carbon dioxide emissions should be increasing. See the story on desmog.com. Agrivoltaics can increase grape yields by 60%. French agrivoltaics company Synagra says that 2 of its facilities this year increased grape yields by 20 to 60% compared to areas without the solar panels. So, yeah, some crops do very well with solar panels over and around them.
And the French obviously know how to grow grapes and make wine out of them. So if this can increase yields, this could be a big thing for French wineries.
Getting tough, though, with global warming. That is hard on the France grape business. From businessgreen.com, 24 countries across Europe now have policies in place to support the rollout of industrial-scale heat pumps. Industrial, yes, you can get one for your home like Brian has, but you can get big-ass ones that power whole industries as well.
No, and we talked about skyscrapers in New York that are getting whole building heat pumps. It's quite amazing stuff.
I wonder if the new jail skyscraper they're building in New York will have a heat pump. United States, strange stuff. Rhode Island is a solar electricity powerhouse. I bet you didn't know that. Now ranking number 4 in the United States after Nevada. Rhode Island, not known for being a sunny desert in any way. It is in the northeast coast, or the eastern coast. It is after Nevada, California, and Hawaii in terms of the percent of its grid plus behind-the-meter electricity demand met solely by solar. And finally this week, the United Kingdom is confirming in political discourse that is going on now that the ban is actually going to happen to nice vehicles in 2030. God, Brian, it's 5 years from now. We're halfway through the run of our podcast already. Where did the time go?
Coming up.
This did, they announced it last summer, but recent discussions in the UK seem to indicate they'll actually stick to it this time and not move it back to 2035 like they did before. Some political observers are saying hybrids will be allowed until 2035. I'm okay with that. The United Kingdom has confirmed the strict requirement: no new petrol and diesel cars are to be sold from 2030. Different countries have different bans, but 2030 is pretty aggressive. Obviously, Norway is leading the world at 2025, and it's working, but you have to put policies in place. You can't just suddenly do it. You have to work up to it. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is sending out clear signals and is sticking to his ambitious target. The ZEV mandate of 22% new car sales must be battery electric by 2024 is what they were doing. The car industry criticizes that this could only be achieved through high discounts, which are not sustainable. Well, tell that to China and tell that the people are actually working hard on EVs. The penalty: manufacturers who do not fulfill the requirements face fines up to £15,000 per vehicle.
The Clean Energy Show.
Which kind of is what maybe some of them would sell them at a loss at, so it's kind of the same. An alternative to this is to buy quotas from other manufacturers who exceed their targets, but congratulations, United Kingdom. We'll be keeping an eye on that in the future for sure, Brian.
Yeah, that's great news. And that is our show for this week. You can contact us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, around social media. We're Clean Energy Pod. And you can join our Patreon community. You can join for free to get special posts not found anywhere else, and the link is in your show notes. You can also support the show with a purchase from the Clean Energy merch store. That's listed in the show notes or on the website. And if you can, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen. And remember to subscribe on your podcast app, and you will get new episodes every week.
And thank you, especially to our Patreon members, our Apple Podcast subscribers, and YouTube membership holders for supporting our show. You make it possible. Join our Patreon today as a paying member and get access to exclusive bonus episodes. Brian, we are about to do another bonus episode, our third. We do one every month, and I want to have a Festivus theme show where we air our grievances. Let's air some grievances in this show. You can also get ad-free episodes, exclusive access to the Clean Energy Show Discord server, discounts at our merch store, early access to our episodes before the public gets them, and behind-the-scenes material and private updates. Thank you credits on our video podcast and shout-outs on our audio podcast, which I am about to do. Thanks to our Patreon members and our Clean Club executive level: Green Bastard, Ryder, Clean Club Plus, Bob Armstrong, Wes S., Clean Club, Andy Fessler, Sean Hines, Timo Kellenberger, Peter D. O'Donnell. Thank you, everyone. And thank you especially also to our supporter level members. Every one of you makes a big difference to our show, and we really, really appreciate you supporting us. We'll see you again in 7 days to do it again. This was fun, and I think next week it'll be fun too, because I'm in a good mood.
See you next week.
The Clean Energy Show.